Hey guys, thank you so much for clicking on today's video. My name is Annalise and this is my channel where we get planty with it. So today I'm going to be doing an update video on the import order I received a couple of months ago from GREENSPACES. I did unbox it here on my channel, so definitely check out that video first if you haven't seen it yet. But I wanted to give you guys kind of a two and a half-ish month update on how my plants are doing. So if you want to see my import updates, then stay tuned. I guess I'll start from least exciting to most exciting. So first up is my Philodendron Pariso verde. Here she is in this first off. Let me just show you guys. This super cute little daisy planter. It's actually, I think, maybe a cup made by a ceramicist, but I repurposed it into a planter. But that's not the important part. Here is the plant. So a little bit sad, as you can see, both leaves here are entirely green. When I first got the plant, it did have that traditional Pariso verde variegation. It had a couple leaves with really amazing variegation. This plant, I think, did lose at least 2 leaves, both of which were variegated, and since then it's just put out green ones. I don't really know what's going on with that. I did just move it to a new location. Before, it was living in one of my greenhouse cabinets, and I just moved it into my plant room a little bit further away from the light. I have heard conflicting things with this plant. Some people say that give it really high light to bring the variegation back, but I've also heard that giving it lower light will bring the variegation back. So I wanted to try the lower light option because it's already been sitting in pretty high light for a few months and it hasn't had any variegation clearly. So I'm hoping that changing its lighting situation will help it put out some better variegation or better variegated leaves. On the bright side, this plant has rooted up super well. It is still living in sphagnum moss in here, and I did put it on this little moss pole, but it has a really great root system now. It did arrive with roots. All of my import plants arrived with roots, but I'm glad that it was able to acclimate pretty well without too much significant damage besides losing a couple of leaves. Next up is another plant that is not doing badly, but it's not doing as well as I would have hoped. And that is my Philodendron sodor. Here she is. You can see just how beautiful the foliage is. Like, look at those silvery, pillowy leaves. And it's doing decently. So she's still in sphagnum moss, rooted up very well in here. And I just put it on a pole. This was also living inside my greenhouse cabinet for a while. I was trying to give it really good conditions because it started out with not a great root system. I pretty much had to cut off all of the roots because they started rotting pretty much, and it completely rerooted in there and did really well. So I took it out of the greenhouse cabinet eventually, and the leaves have been coming out really wonky. This is not just since I took it out. This is even when it was in the greenhouse cabinet, the leaves were coming out weird. So I'm not really sure what the deal is with this plant. Even the new leaf here, I don't know if you guys can see, it's broken. It's split itself there. I probably should have tried to help it out, but I always get nervous trying to help leaves out of their sheath. So I don't really know what the deal is with this one. It's definitely a little frustrating. Obviously, I'm not going to give up on it. I might cut it back and maybe try to like grow some of it in a propagation box to see how it does. But yeah, this plant's doing okay. I'm not like in love right now. What's interesting is my other Philodendron sodor is doing very well. So these are the leaves it came with, and these leaves did sustain a little damage. This is entirely my fault. It was pressed up against the window and the temperatures like last week went down to 10 degrees or something, so we did get some cold damage. But these were the 3 leaves it came with, these top 3, and then it's put out these 2 little leaves down here. Here's the newest leaf that I think is so pretty. This is not an import. This one I actually purchased at the Ecuador pop-up, but I just wanted to show it to compare what a mature sodor can look like, and also to mention that I haven't had any trouble with leaves on this one unfurling. I don't know if that's just because it's a much bigger size, but this one's been totally fine in typical room humidity and whatever, and putting out perfect leaves. So I don't know what's going on with the other one, but hopefully it'll make a turnaround in the next couple of months. Okay, so now on to some of the more exciting plants or successful plants. First up is a plant actually my boyfriend got. I think you guys saw it at the end of the video, and that was a Sercestus mirabilis. This one we were really excited about because they're pretty hard to find in the US, and we were really worried about it with shipping. The leaves are pretty thin and kind of delicate, so we were nervous that it would not ship well. But here she is. There are 3 original leaves that the plant came with. Here's one of them, here is the other, and here's the third. So as you can see, all 3 leaves that it came with did completely fine. The only minimal damage was down here, but this was already a little bit brown when it arrived, so that really has not been a big deal. But guess what? It's finally putting out a new leaf, its first new leaf since it arrived. It's gonna be so pretty. It looks like it's gonna be a really good size leaf. So we're super excited about this one. It was kind of falling everywhere, so we put a little plastic trellis in here to hold it up, and it's in sphagnum, but you can see it is super well rooted in there. Super, super well. It's in sphagnum and perlite, a little mix of both. So this one was definitely a success. I'm gonna give my full thoughts on whether the import was worth it at the end of the video, but we're very excited about this new growth. Last but definitely not least is my Philodendron gigantium. Actually, it's a variegated Philodendron gigantium, and it's been doing amazingly. It did lose one leaf immediately after arriving and then another leaf a couple weeks after arriving, but since then it's completely stabilized and it's super well rooted now. Here she is. So these are some of the original leaves. The variegation was okay, not, you know, super amazing. You can definitely see it, but it's more faded. And then for some reason, the 2 leaves it put out in my care are like super well variegated. This is one of them. So you can see there's so much more white, and then this is the newest one, which is my favorite. It's like beautifully variegated. It's just so beautiful. So this plant has definitely been a success. You can also see there's a ton of root growth. I have it in leca here. It was in water for a good while, and then I transferred it to leca. So it's doing really well, and I'm very happy about this one. So the question I'm sure you're wondering is importing worth it? Did I feel like this order was worth it? As we all know, importing does carry some additional costs that you don't face when you're just buying plants domestically. You do have to pay a $35 phytosanitary certificate. Usually you have to pay for shipping, which can range from $50 to $60, maybe even $70. And I also had to pay an import fee. Once the plant arrived in the US, they sent me an email requesting a $25 fee to release it from the import. So you pay all these extra fees. So I guess the real question is it worth all that extra money as opposed to maybe paying a little bit more and buying a plant domestically? I think yes and no. As you guys know, 2 of my plants I imported did not make it. One was a syngonium and one was a piper, which brings me to my first point. I think it really depends on what type of plant you want to import, whether or not it's worth it to import. So I probably would not, or I try not to import syngonium because from what I've seen, they really don't ship very well. I probably would try to stick with importing philodendron, maybe alocasia, Hoya, some of the thicker leafed plants, because those are the ones that seem to do well and bounce back quickly after importing. I think importing is worth it for some plants. So certain plants that are really hard to find here, I think become worth it. So for instance, the variegated Philodendron gigantium, I really don't see a lot of them available. And when I do see them on Etsy or other shops, they're usually a few $100s versus a much cheaper price on import. And since that's a philodendron, I felt pretty confident that I'd be able to rehab it if it came in bad condition. So I think that's a plant that was definitely worth importing. The other plant that I think was really worth importing was the Sercestus mirabilis. That's another plant that I really never see for sale here, and when I do, it's at least $300 if not more. So I think that was another plant that was definitely worth it, especially considering that it fared so well in shipping, which I did not expect. So overall, I think importing is worth it. Definitely do your research on what companies you want to import from. I've only ever imported from GREENSPACES and had good experiences. I think definitely be ready and expect that there are going to be some losses, whether that's loss of an entire plant or losing all of the leaves and having to grow the plant back from a node. So I would really only import if you feel confident that you can rehab a plant, but just note that you may lose some plants and that's part of the process. But I am really happy with how my plants are doing now and really grateful that I'm able to have some of these plants in my collection that I would not be able to find otherwise in the US. So that is pretty much my take on importing. Comment down below, have you guys imported plants before and where from? Have you had a good experience, bad experience? I definitely want to try out importing from other places other than GREENSPACES just to kind of compare and contrast the experience. So definitely let me know if you have any that you recommend and I'll check them out and make a video on them, of course. That's going to be it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye!